Hey, Jazz fans, time for another 5-minute fight against racism. When the NBA and the NBA Players Association announced that athletes would have the choice of placing a social justice message on their jersey heading into the playoffs, Joe Ingles said that it took him some time to figure out what he wanted to pick. On the Ingles Insight podcast, subscribe today, Joe said as a white player from Australia, he's been too unfamiliar with racism in America, but he said he's learned more about it this year than he ever knew before, and so he wanted to put something meaningful on his jersey to show his support. According to Australian athlete Renee Ingles, who Joe's married to and is also on the Ingles Insight podcast, Joe's the only player in the league who chose the word ally. Here's how he decided.
I actually spoke to a bunch of our guys in our team, and probably Donovan mainly, but was like, as a foreigner who's also white, what brings across a strong message of, like, I'm in this, like, I'm here to support, I'm 100% behind it. And it was a few of those guys that kind of threw that one out there, and obviously then doing some research, and obviously the meaning of ally, of kind of uniting and combining together. And between all that, I guess it was kind of an easy decision, because that's, like I said, I'm 100% behind these guys. I want to be a part of it. I want to help and push the message from my point of view as a white Australian as much as I can.
Okay, so Joe's description isn't going to fit on a t-shirt or a bumper sticker, and I couldn't fit it on a meme, but I think he nailed a few of the very most basic things about what it means to be an ally. First, he acknowledged his lack of knowledge. Honest curiosity is one of the best tools we can use in the fight against racism. Curiosity is an antidote to denial and defensiveness, which are two of the most common reactions white people especially have when they're talking about racism in America. Second, Joe spoke directly to people he knew, guys that we know too, but whose names he wouldn't share. Guys who've had direct experiences with racism, and he sat with some of the strongest people he's ever known as they broke down in tears talking about what they and their friends and their families have experienced as black people in America. Third, Joe said that he wanted to unite with them, to combine with them. Those were the words that he used to define ally, uniting and combining together in a common cause against racism. Notice that he didn't say, I put ally on my jersey because black people really need my help, right? He's not presenting himself as the great white guy who's finally here to solve racism for everyone. Joe said that he wants to be part of a fight against racism that's been going on long before he was even aware of it. Because being an ally isn't an identity that you can choose. It's a process that you engage in. And all along, Joe's recognizing that his work comes from a limited white Australian point of view. And yes, Australia also has its own issues with racism based on its own unique history. So we can hope that Joe takes this fight home and works as an ally in his own country as well. As psychologist Beverly Daniel Tatum put it, the role of the ally is not to help those targeted by racism per se, but to stand in solidarity with them, fighting against racism in ourselves, our communities, and especially challenging other white people to do the same. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel here either. I mean, this 5-minute fight was actually harder to prepare because there's so much great information that's already available, and what could I choose from? I mean, the wheel is ready, and it's on us to get in the driver's seat and hit the gas pedal. Now, Joe Ingles isn't the only white Jazz player who's been vocal about being an ally. Kyle Korver, who's been on the team multiple times, wrote an outstanding article last season called Privileged. Link is in the description below. And there he offers some great advice about how we can begin. I could hardly say it better than he did, so let's look at it again. Kyle knows that as a white person, he can actually choose to opt out of the whole thing. So he asks himself, how can I, as a white man, part of this systemic problem, become part of the solution when it comes to racism in my workplace, in my community, in this country? I don't think I have all the answers yet, but here are the ones that are starting to ring the most true. I have to continue to educate myself on the history of racism in America. I have to listen. I have to support leaders who see racial justice as fundamental, as something that's at the heart of nearly every major issue in our country today. And I have to support policies that do the same. I have to do my best to recognize when to get out of the way in order to amplify the voices of marginalized groups that so often get lost. But maybe more than anything, I know that as a white man, I have to hold my fellow white men accountable. We all have to hold each other accountable. And we all have to be accountable, period. Not just for our own actions, but also for the ways that our inaction can create a safe space for toxic behavior. Together with Joe Ingles and Kyle Korver, we join a long procession in the history of white allies, imperfect and stumbling allies, people who want to fight racism alongside our black sisters and brothers. Okay, let's recap. You and me, we have a lot to learn, so we need to be curious rather than defensive. Listen to black people and other people who have been impacted by racism. Read books written by black people. Watch movies. Talk to friends. Listen. And third, find ways that you can directly interrupt and fight racism as an ally alongside black people who've been fighting it all along. 5 minutes doesn't give me near enough time to even begin covering more specific ways we can fight, so more 5-minute fights against racism are on the way, including a look at some of the other jersey messages the Jazz players are wearing this season.